So it looks like the love affair between Judge Andrew Napolitano and U.S. President Donald Trump is over, as we are seeing a very furious war of words right now on Twitter by the president. And that's why we're in this video. We are going to be discussing who was right, what are the issues, and what's happening here. And to me, Jason, I find this topic very interesting since Andrew Napolitano has been a very long time supporter of Donald Trump. He's been one of the main characters that a lot of people in the anti-establishment community have been pointing to as the guy that Donald Trump was going to elect to the Supreme Court, that he was the guy that Trump was listening to, that he was a guy that stood up for civil liberties and freedom. And now it looks like that theory that was out there definitely backfires, to say the least. And also, it's also interesting to note here that Judge Napolitano was also in hot water in Fox News, being actually suspended indefinitely because he was actually talking about how Donald Trump was being spied on. And again, his claim was actually vindicated by the U.S. Attorney General Barr. So it's interesting to see Trump right now attack him in a very scattering Twitter post, talking about how Judge Napolitano asked him to pardon his friend and to put him on the Supreme Court. This, of course, raised a lot of eyeballs. But, Jason, the conversation here is a lot deeper, but it looks very superficial just to be about ego. But what is the actual debate and conversation about specifically that has brokered these two individuals that started this war of words?
Right. So, everybody's talking about how the Mueller report can now be interpreted. And as I said, as soon as I saw it was in two parts, obstruction of justice and Russian collusion, a lot of people were going to run with obstruction of justice to get Trump out of office. And even I was surprised to see some of the things that Napolitano said about the obstruction claims. He basically says, yeah, no, there was obstruction of justice. And he cites a few different things, Luke.
I have his quote lined up here, so I'm just going to read his quote really quickly before we get into Dershowitz's response. Who, by the way, Alan Dershowitz, we've been talking about him for a long time. He's supporting WikiLeaks. He's actually connected to WikiLeaks. We're going to talk about him in just a little bit. But Judge Napolitano said, quote, "I am disappointed in the behavior of the president. If he had ordered his aides to violate federal law to save a human life or to preserve human freedom, he would at least have a moral defense at his behavior. But ordering them to break federal law to save him from the consequences of his behavior, that is immoral, that is criminal, that is defenseless, that is condemnable." He, of course, published this in an op-ed earlier this week, and he pretty much laid out how Donald Trump, according to him, broke at least half a dozen crimes of obstruction of justice. So this is a pretty, very big, bold claim, which I would actually contend on some levels by Napolitano that was made earlier this week. But Dershowitz had a response, too. Should we get into that?
Yeah, I also want to talk about some of the actual claims he said that were obstruction of justice. He said, look, you had somebody go and change their testimony. That's something you did. You had that discussion. That is obstruction of justice. And that's why I think we are in murky waters, especially with Mueller himself in the report not making a judgment whether to charge him. Now, Dershowitz, what an interesting character, right? He obviously represents the president on some level almost all the time in any media. Whenever there's an issue, especially with Russiagate, he's had his back, and I think correctly so. Now, this is the same guy that is the lawyer for Jeffrey Epstein. He's in his own case where he's been accused of some rather harsh things, let's say that. And then on the other end of the spectrum, just like you said, Luke, he represents WikiLeaks. He got involved with them in 2011. I've shown some video of him where he talked about meeting with Assange. He said that he would be a representative here in the United States if it ever came to that. This was all the way back in 2013, Luke. And now that it has, nothing has come out officially, but he has defended Assange's position in the media.
Harsh things, to say it mildly, being accused of course. And it's interesting, again, so, representing Assange, but then also representing and having Trump's back, and it's Trump's administration who's extraditing and calling for Assange to go to jail. A lot of hypocrisy here, but Dershowitz officially responded to Napolitano, and he said, of course, this was on the Ingram angle. He said that because it is within the president's purview to terminate the investigation or fire special counsel Robert Mueller, any attempts he made to do so could not be described as obstruction because, according to Dershowitz, Trump had this power. He didn't use it. He didn't overstep his balance. He said, quote, in my introduction to the Mueller report, I go through the elements of obstruction of justice. Dershowitz explained the act itself has to be illegal. It can't be an act that is authorized by Article 2 of the Constitution, stating that, of course, as a legal justification for what Trump did. But, of course, Trump answered back in his Twitter post. And, of course, he said specifically, Trump tweeted this just yesterday, 11 p.m. at night, saying, quote, thank you to brilliant and highly respected Attorney General Alan Dershowitz for destroying the very dumb legal argument of, in quotes, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Again, I wish Trump would take his advice on Assange and other things, but that's regardless. The second tweet continues, ... Ever since Andrew came to my office to ask that I appoint him to the U.S. Supreme Court, and I said no, he has been very hostile. Also asked for pardon for his friend, a good pal of low ratings Shepard Smith. Now, it's still unclear what the pardon comment was directly responding to. Yeah, that's definitely Trump's point of view in this take. I would say, Jason, just a little bit biased there, speaking sarcastically.
Well, I'm not in love with his relationship with Alan Dershowitz, obviously. I think Napolitano has been good on a lot of things. I know that Trump is one that is not going to ignore something like this, so I understand that. Shepard Smith on the Fox News network, in my opinion, has done CNN-like work with Russia, and I'm not a huge fan. He's done some, mildly decent stuff in the past, but not a lot of great stuff in general. He's a pretty establishment guy. And then the pardon comment, is he making a jab, saying, I'm going to pardon your buddy for, being a jerk to me on the air, or is this a real pardon? Did Judge Napolitano ask him to pardon one of his actual friends? Now, let me say this. He did pardon somebody I know about, Scooter Libby, the right-hand man of Dick Cheney, who was highly involved in a lot of corruption in the Bush administration, and even further back than that, I can promise you. So, Trump, in many cases, when he talks about pardons, doesn't have a leg to stand on, especially when he's asked by the press, hey, what's with this WikiLeaks situation? He knows Alan Dershowitz. Dershowitz knows the WikiLeaks situation. He loved the WikiLeaks on the campaign trail, and he goes, WikiLeaks, it's not my thing. I don't really know much about it.
Yeah. Same with Michael Flynn, his former national security advisor. Totally mum. People are like, is he going to pardon Michael Flynn? And everyone's looking at like, probably not. And that's something to really consider here. But Trump, you had a clip. Do you still want to play this clip, Jason?
Yeah, because again, this is what I don't love about Donald Trump, among other things, right, Luke? He says he says things like, all right, he can get away with the no Russian collusion. They didn't find any Russian collusion in the thing. But he talks about being completely exonerated of obstruction of justice when we know that this has already been the talking point for the left and the anti-Trumpers now for over a week. Yet he fearlessly says things like this.
And after 3 years of lies and smears and slander,
agreed,
the Russia hoax is finally dead.
Not really. It should be, but it's not.
The collusion delusion is over.
It's over.
The special counsel completed its report and found no collusion and no obstruction.
See, let's stop it. They didn't say that they found no obstruction. In fact, they tried to lay out many points where they said obstruction of justice could have happened. And again, I don't necessarily agree with that, Luke. I don't think that was what this was about. I honestly believe in the very beginning they thought they would be able to get the president himself in a perjury trap. They thought that they would get him to say something and then charge him criminally with that. When they were unable to get him to basically testify against himself, that's when they really started to put pressure on friends, charge them with other crimes that had no relation whatsoever to Russian collusion. And when all that failed to get him, they decided, hey, we're going to make this report into 2 parts, and 180 plus pages of it is going to be dedicated to what he just said he was exonerated of, obstruction of justice. It's a pretty wild thing that's happened in our country. I mean, this was a 90-minute speech, by the way. We're going to do another video more in depth on it. But he really brings it home, and he says, look, these people are going to be held responsible. We're going after them. And honestly, I'd like to see him go after the Brennans of the world and the Muellers of the world and the Strucks of the world for what this was, a complete and total hoax.
Or, just hold them accountable for their past previous government unaccountable behavior. Yeah, I mean, that would be good too. I mean, again, D.C. is a swamp. And to me, this is a big ego battle. I think the truth is always somewhere in the middle. Yes, Trump was, again, not charged, but he also was not, totally, made free of obstruction. Again, it's somewhere in the middle. I could understand why he's running with it, with the pure amount of insanity and the slander and the incorrect hysteria that has been used against them. But again, it's important to be very, very critical of the facts here and critical of everyone, especially if they are in power, and look at both sides of the story. If you thought we did that, share this video, because for damn straight, YouTube won't be recommending this video. I have to see what they're doing to Louder with Crowder, but our numbers are, what's happening behind the scenes is absolutely insane. And just put it short, we need your help more than ever. Either sharing this video or donating to us will keep us alive. And because you guys keep us alive as free, independent media, this is why I try to end every single broadcast by saying, I love you guys. Stay tuned for more here on wearechange.org.